Return to the Mid-Sodor Railway. Written and told by Kiefer Adams. "This just won't do, Albert," the Mid-Sodor manager complained. "That's the third time this week that you've collapsed your fire bars. We can't keep repairing you." Albert looked miserably at his buffers. "I'm sorry, sir," he said. "I won't do it again, I promise." "I believed you the first 2 times you said that," said the manager. "You're expendable, Albert. That's your trouble. I have more problems with Smudger than I deal with you." As if on cue, Juke's guard, who had been walking up the line from his morning train, arrived. He looked flustered. Speaking of Smudger, sir, he's done it again." The manager was cross. "Where's he derailed this time?" he asked. "Glennock," replied Juke's guard. "John's just gone to fetch him." "I'll have some words for Smudger when he gets back," said the manager sternly. He turned to Albert. "I'll decide your fate later." And he stormed away. Albert blushed a deep shade of red and looked at his buffers once more, pleased that for once the attention was not on him. A little later, Juke returned from his morning train. As he backed into the sheds, Smudger was complaining to his crew, blaming them for being the cause of his derailments. His face fell when the manager arrived. "You are a reckless and disobedient engine," he said, pointing a finger in the green engine's face. "Your crew had nothing to do with your behaviour for all the times you've derailed. That was all on you."
"Oh, wise up, sir,"
Smudger snapped back.
"Where I come from, we don't give a dime for a few spills."
Juke's mouth hung open. No one had ever spoken to the manager like that, not even Juke when he was a younger engine. But the manager kept his composure and folded his arms. "Oh, really?" he said. "Well then, we've always needed better ventilation at the back of the shed. Perhaps when we take your wheels and cab off, you can start your new life as our generator. That way, you won't be causing any more spills, will you?" He turned and walked angrily away. Smudger's feelings were beyond words. He turned to Juke, knowing that in the past he had got him out of trouble. But this time Juke didn't do anything. Smudger's fate had now been sealed. A few days later, Smudger's new position as generator for the Mid-Sodor Railway shed was put into place, and Albert was sent to the mainland works, but he would not return. Juke called a meeting with many of the engines who could attend.
"What if we get sold off next?"
cried Jennings. "Oh, I don't want to leave this railway," exclaimed Jim. "I've made too many friends already."
"This is preposterous,"
bellowed John.
"No one is going anywhere. What happened to Smudger and Albert was their own fault. We can still work hard as a railway."
Jerry was the youngest of the little engines. He looked from one engine to the other, and then at Juke.
"What do you propose we do?"
he asked. "John is quite right," said Juke. "Along with Atlas and Tim, we are still a working railway. We will keep making the manager proud and the railway proud. Heck, I'll even make his Grace proud if I have to." The little engines were moved by Juke's speech.
"Precisely, Juke,"
said John.
"Well done. Now come on, you lot. We've got work to do."
John then departed with his passenger train. Jerry went to shunt trucks in the yard, and Jim and Jennings went to the coal mines. Juke would be heading up to the incline line to help Atlas and Tim, but he decided to rest for a moment. He was hoping that things would get better for the railway, now that Smudger and Albert were no longer working on it. A little later, Juke arrived at the incline line and found Tim and Atlas already there.
"Is it true, Juke?"
Tim asked nervously.
"Has Smudger really become a generator? I saw Jerry, he told me everything."
"Yes, young'un," replied Juke gravely. "I'm afraid it is." "And Albert?" asked Atlas. Juke sighed and gently closed his eyes, like a man nodding his head. "Albert might have been a grouch," said Atlas, "but he was still useful when he wasn't breaking down."
But we're now 2 engines down.
Exclaimed Tim.
And what if the railway closes? We'll be out of a job.
"That won't happen, Tim," said Juke. "Don't forget, when this railway first opened, you were by my side. The other engines understand this, and they will keep the railway going, no matter what is thrown at us." Tim and Atlas exchanged nervous looks, but they knew Juke was right. After all, he was the oldest of the Mid-Sodor engines, and he promised to lead them all into what would come their way. Along with the other engines, Juke worked very hard. But hard times soon came, and soon the likes of Tim, Jerry, Atlas, Jim, Jennings and John were sold or retired to other railways. They came and went, and soon Juke had outlasted them all. One spring morning, Juke was sitting in the shed on his own, thinking of his old friends. At that moment, the manager strode up. He had a rolled-up piece of parchment under his arm. "Good morning, Juke," he said. "I've got some great news for you. We've just acquired 2 new little engines. They're from the works that we brought Albert from and Kerr Stuart, respectfully. They'll be here tomorrow." "Oh, that's wonderful news, sir," said Juke. "Excuse me, sir," he added, noticing the rolled-up parchment, "but what's that?" "Ah," said the manager, "I almost forgot about this. The Duke of Sodor has been told that you've been a little under the weather, so he sent this to me in hopes it'll cheer you up." Very carefully, the manager unrolled the parchment. Juke could not believe his eyes. There in front of him, held by the manager, was a beautifully painted portrait of Juke. The Duke of Sodor's signature was in the corner of the paper. "Oh, bless his grace!" exclaimed Juke. "That's a wonderful likeness of me." "It'll be in my office for now," said the manager, "but I do hope you like it." "It's wonderful, sir," said Juke, "and don't you worry about those new engines. I'll make them feel welcome." The manager smiled. "Treat them as you've treated others," he said. He then returned to his office, leaving Juke once again alone with his thoughts. Finally, things seemed to be looking up for the old engine. "The following day, Stuart and Falcon came," said Juke to Thomas. "I've never known such cheeky engines, but they performed valiantly, and we did so for the rest of the Mid-Sodor's days." "What a wonderful story," smiled Thomas. He had arrived near the Skarloey Railway to pick up some vans when he had finally met Juke, who thanked him for sharing the legacy of the Mid-Sodor Railway. "I must ask, Thomas," said Juke, "whatever did happen to manager's portrait of me?" "The Fat Controller managed to buy it when the railway closed," said Thomas. "He's given it to us, and it's hung up in our shed." "How wonderful," smiled Juke. "I'm so glad it's still safe." Soon it was time for Thomas to leave. "Goodbye, Juke," he whistled, "and thank you for telling me about your old days." "And thank you for sharing the legacy of the Mid-Sodor, young'un," said Juke happily. "It's been a great honour." Thomas soon puffed away with his vans, while Juke drifted off to sleep in the afternoon sun. I'm not sure what he was thinking about as Juke dozed, but I am guessing it had something to do with some memories of 3 little engines who lived in their own little shed on their own little railway.